Okay, so today we're looking at 5.2, which is 3 terms without a coefficient. So what I mean by that is for each of these do not have a number sitting in front of the first term. We'll look at those in 5.3. So our steps for factoring are always step 1, check for a common factor. None of these are going to have a common factor because they don't have a number in front. They can only have a common factor if they have a coefficient. And so we're going to do 3 terms without a coefficient. Now, before we start these, let's look at where they come from. These come from a multiplication problem like this up here. This is what we did in 4.6, where you multiply this out, or FOIL it is what some people say. So y times y is y squared. Y times 1 is a positive 1y. And then you do the 8 times y is 8y. And 8 times 1 is 9. And these middle terms had together giving you a y squared plus 9y plus 9. So if you notice, all these have 3 terms without a number in front. So we've got to think about what multiplies to give you this number but adds to give you these numbers in the middle here. And these sound complicated, but these are actually probably the easiest for most people. And so before we start these though, I want to go back over our sign rules. So remember, when the signs are alike, you add and keep the same sign, because this is going to be important on these. And when the signs are different, you subtract and take the sign of the larger. And so that's going to come into play when we're dealing with these middle numbers here. So when we had 4 terms in 5.1, we did what's called grouping. When we have 3 terms without a coefficient, we do what I call read it backwards, because you're really undoing it. It's like a puzzle. You're wanting to undo what's been done. And so what I mean by read it backwards is we're going to start at the end. And so what I want is factors of 24 that add to be 10. So we're reading it backwards. 24 that add to be 10. So factors are things that so what we want is something that multiplies to give you 24 but adds to give you 10. And a lot of people can just look at it and know the answer, and if you do, that's perfectly fine. Just keep going. But if not, just know you can always find your factors by just listing your digits, 1 and so on, and dividing. 24 divided by 1 is 24. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 24 divided by 3 is 8. 24 divided by 4 is 6. 5 won't work, and then you see when you get to 6, you would repeat. So as soon as you repeat, these are all the factors in the world that you can have to give you 10. And so some people, it helps to list them. I still usually list them myself. I don't know, just because I'm a visual learner, so I like to see them there. But here's our list, and we want the ones that add to give you 10. So do you see 6 and 4 would multiply to give you 24, but would add to give you 10. So our answer is going to be 2 sets of parentheses. Now, there's lots of different ways that teachers teach to do this, and most teach by trial and error. You just plug it in and figure out what your signs are. But I have this cute little trick that really works, and it comes from these sign rules. So do you see that you're always going to take the sign of the larger? If you're adding, you keep the same sign, so that would be the same thing. And if you're subtracting, you take the sign of the larger. And so what I like to do is, if you'll put the largest one first and the smallest one second, it'll make your signs so much easier, because if people miss these, it's usually about your signs. And so what I mean by that is 6 is the larger of the factors and 4 is the smaller. So put your largest one first. Then you look at your first number here. The only factors of y squared we can have are y and y, so that's going to factor out to be a y and y. X squared is going to be an x and x, and so on. Up in college algebra, you might have an x to the 4, and it would break up to be x2 and x2. You're just splitting it in half. X to the 6 would be x3, x3. But all you're going to have in this class is y2, so those broke up to be y and y. And because we put the largest one first, we can just bring this sign down. We don't even have to think about that. If you put the largest first, the first sign comes down. And then we look up. This sign does not come down. We look up at adding. And when you add, the signs are alike. And when you subtract, the signs are different. So because we're adding, these signs have to be alike. So this one's always going to come down. And then this one, if we're adding, is going to be the same. If that last sign was subtraction, then it would be a plus. It would be different. So when you're adding, these signs have to be alike. And that's our answer. Let's try another one. So again, 3 terms without a coefficient. We know we're going to go straight to 2 parentheses, and we're going to read it backwards. This time I want factors of 21 that subtract to be 4. So this last sign is really important. It tells you, do you need them to add or do you need them to subtract? And it also affects your signs in the end. So my factors of 21 are 1 times 21, 2 won't work, 3 times 7. So of this list, which ones subtract to be 4? 3 and 7. So we do largest, smallest. Again, that's important with working with these signs. My factors of x squared are x and x. First sign comes down. We look up. It doesn't come down. We look up. We're subtracting this time. So when we subtract, the signs have to be different. So if this one's minus, this one's plus. And that's our answer. Now, the nice thing, I should have said this before, is you can always multiply it back out to make sure you get the right answer. So to check it, which you can do on your test, is just say x times x is x squared. X times positive 3 is a positive 3x. Negative 7 times x is a negative 7x. And negative 7 times positive 3 is a negative 21. These add together to give you that minus 4x. So I always do this kind of in my head. I don't make you really write it down, but you really should check all your answers, even if you do it quickly in your head. Because see, negative 7 and positive 3 need to be the negative 4, and negative 7 times positive 3 needs to be that 21. Okay, let's try another one. So this one's factors of 20 that add to be 12. Again, if you know it's 2 and 10, just jump right in. But if you don't, we can list them. It's 1 times 20, 2 times 10, 3 won't work because 20 divided by 3 is a decimal, and 4 times 5. And then do you see we repeat, so we know we've got all of them. So we want the factors that add to be 12, which would be 2 and 10. So we go to our 2 parentheses. Remember, largest, smallest, that's important with the signs. So 10 first, and then 2. My factors of x squared are x and x. This first sign comes down. So if you put the largest first, you never even have to think about the first sign. It just comes down. And then you look up, we're adding. So remember, when we add, the signs in our answer have to be alike. So if this one's plus, this one's plus. And also, we need a positive 10 and a positive 2 to give us that positive 12. Okay, let's look at this next one. Now, this one's a little different because of this y squared here. But this x squared at the beginning, let's do our 2 parentheses. That x squared at the beginning just does an x and an x. So all this y squared at the end is going to do is a y and a y. So when you have y squared at the end, you just stick a y at each end. And then you read it backwards. I want factors of 30 that subtract. This doesn't have a number, so it's the number 1. So I need factors of 30 that subtract to be 1. Again, if you know what it is, just jump right in. But if not, let's list our factors of 30. 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 4 won't work, 5 times 6. And you see that's the one that subtracts to be 1. So we do largest, smallest. We already did our x and x. This sign comes down. We look up, we're subtracting. So remember up here from our sign rules, when you subtract, the signs have to be different. So if this sign is plus, this side has to be different and be negative, because we need a positive 6 and a negative 5 to be that positive 1. And that's your answer. This last one, you can't really tell it's different by looking at it, but when we go to break it up, I want factors of 8 that add to be 7. Well, my factors of 8 are 1 times 8 and 2 times 4, and none of those add to be 7. This sign is really important. 8 and 1 subtract to be 7, but they don't add. And so this sign is important. None of those work. And so if it won't work, it's prime. Just like the number 5 is prime because nothing will multiply into 5 except for 1 times 5. So the same thing here. It's prime if there's no other factors that will go into it. So that's 5.2, factoring 3 terms without a coefficient. So you're ready to try your practice problems.